Hey, hello everyone. Please welcome Chelsea. I would like to introduce you our speaker of the night. Chelsea Sweeney is a regulated Canadian immigration consultant, otherwise known as RCIC, in good standing with the College of Immigration and Citizenship Consultants. Her background is in international education in Vancouver and Hong Kong, and she was a former director of events for BC Jobs, where she came to understand the needs of the BC labor market. These days, she spent her time between Britannia Immigration Services and Mosaic, an immigrants nonprofit society. So please welcome Chelsea. I will give you the space for you.
Oh, thank you so much, Tanya. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today to share information on the postgraduate work permit process with your students. So welcome, everybody. Hope everybody's having a great start to your week and that you're wrapping up all your exams in time for the holiday season. I know we have a lot to cover today. There were 99 registrations, as I mentioned in the chat, and all of you sent questions, at least one, if not more. And I've tried to incorporate some of the questions into the end of the presentation today. And if time permits, I will try to take some live questions, but we're going to definitely tackle some of the recurrent questions that we got from the registrations. Okay. And we've got 34 people. Holy smokes. A nice big group today. All right. So let's get started here. So let's talk about, well, what is a PGWP? So in short, it's an open work permit for students once they have graduated from an accredited program at a PGWP eligible institution, for example, like Exenda, but that also includes, colleges and other universities as well across Canada, public and private. And the person who gets the PGWP will be eligible to work for basically any employer in Canada because it's an open work permit. So there are no restrictions to your employer or where you can work in Canada. Another common question that we get when we talk about PGWPs is, how long will you get a PGWP for? And there are some stipulations. So students are eligible to gain the same amount of work experience as the length of their study program if their program is between 8 months and under 2 years. So if you've studied a program that is more than 2 years, you are eligible for a 3-year PGWP. Some exceptions to this rule would be, for example, if you're doing a master's program or a PhD program that is between like 16 to 23 months, then under that eligibility criteria, you could also get a 3-year PGWP. So there are some exceptions to this rule, but in general, if you do like an 8-month program, you'll get an 8-month PGWP. If you do like a 15-month program, you'll get a 15-month PGWP. So anything over 2 years, you're eligible to get 3 years maximum. And the 3 years is the cap. If you do a 4-year bachelor's program, for example, you can only get a maximum of 3 years for this open work permits. So that's kind of the time restrictions for the PGWP and how the eligibility criteria works for that. Alrighty. So I'll move on to my next slide here. So some questions that we get, how to apply for a PGWP. Now there's a couple different ways. So there are 2 departments, and sometimes it can be a little bit confusing how this works. So we have the IRCC, which stands for Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada. So this is a government department. And if you've had, for example, if you have, your study permit was likely processed through the IRCC because you sent in an outside Canada application. The other department is the CBSA, which is the Canada Border Services Agency, which you probably met them in the airport or at the land border when you came into Canada. And these guys can be a little scary sometimes. I know. So with the IRCC, they accept online applications. They do accept some that are paper-based too, but online applications is kind of like the preferred method. And the processing time could take up to 3 to 4 months. I was just looking at the processing times today because it does change, day to day, week to week. And right now, for work permits inside Canada, it's 130 days. So that's roughly like 4.3 months. So that's just kind of like the average time. So I mean, a work permit could be processed quicker than that. But it's roughly 3 to 4 months at this point for an online application with the IRCC. And with the online application, with the applications to the IRCC, in general, you will be submitting more forms and documents than with the CBSA. So a little bit about how the CBSA works. You can apply for a work permit at the land border with Canada and the USA. So this process is called flag polling. And it's usually like a 2-day process. So for those people who live in a city close to the border, like Vancouver, Toronto, it's quite easy to get to the border. If you live in a city like Edmonton, it's this process is kind of tough. So you'd have to, if you lived in a city like Edmonton, you'd probably apply to the IRCC. But because you're, super close to the Canada border, being here in Vancouver, there's this quicker process, which is called flag polling. So you would go down to the Canada border with the US, you would go inside their office and follow their instructions. Sometimes the instructions change from person to person. I've heard different stories, and I've seen different experiences with clients I've brought down to the border. Sometimes they just walk around the building, and that's the flag polling. Sometimes they have to go and walk to the US border, get a stamp in their passport that's refused, come back to Canada, and make an appointment for like the next day or the soonest available slot to come back and submit their documents. So in short, this process is called flag polling because you're kind of going to the middle part between Canada and the US, and then it's like you're leaving Canada and returning back to Canada in a way. And that's why they get some people to walk around the building, because you've left Canada and come back. And this process is really like a 2-day process, because you go down there, you do the flag polling, and then you come back for your appointment, you submit your paperwork, and you can usually get your work permit then and there. So it's a much faster process, but it does mean, finding a ride to the border. I mean, the borders aren't easy to get to if you don't have a car. But it's much faster than submitting all the paperwork to the IRCC, and less paperwork too, which I'll talk about in a second. And so some of the documents needed, and I don't know if anyone can see, there's a blue line on my screen, but I don't know how that got there. For documents to submit to the IRCC, it's pretty simple. Like, you would submit an IRCC form. There's, of course, your final transcript or graduation certificate or a letter from your university. You need to submit your passport, so an identity document, your immigration status, so your study permit. If you have a current work permit, you would submit that too, just to show them, all your immigration status documents. I always recommend submitting some extra paperwork too. For example, ties to your home country. So similar documents that you would have submitted for your study permit application. So when you apply for a temporary, resident application, like a study permit, a work permit, or even a visitor visa, you want to show the IRCC that you will return to your home country at the end of your stay. Okay, even if your plans are permanent residency, you still have to show that you have some ties to your home country. So with the IRCC applications, it's always good to submit as many documents as you can. So if there's something that ties you back to your home country, I would submit that as well to the IRCC. With the CBSA, they require less documents. So they just want to see your passport, your immigration status, and your final transcript or graduation certificate. Or if you don't have either of these, it would be like a letter from your university or college about your graduation. So in short, these are the most common documents that you would be submitting with your application. And I was double checking the document checklist for the IRCC, and they don't even require like a photo. Like normally you would submit a photo or medical exam or things like that for other work permit applications and a resume, but they don't require this for the PGWP. I mean, you could include it, but it's not on the checklist that they ask for. Okay. Now, as I'm going along, if anybody has any questions that they want me to clarify about any of this information, I just encourage you to maybe pop your question into the chat box. So the chat box on your screen should be at the bottom center. On my screen, it's at the bottom top. So I moved up. Oh, Giovanna's got a question. Sure, I'll just get you to unmute yourself and you can ask a question, Giovanna.
Hi, sorry. I just want to clarify for the length of post-graduation work permit, because my
Sure.
program is exact 24 months. Am I eligible for 3 years or for less?
Okay, so going back to, let me just, how did I get on pen mode? Okay, I'm just gonna go back to our previous screen here. So how long will my PGWP be for? And sorry, going back to your question, Giovanna, how long was your program?
24 months exactly.
24 months. So that would be 2 years. Yeah, so then you should,
Okay,
in
thank
theory,
you so much.
you should be, in theory, eligible for a 3-year PGWP. So even if you had like regularly scheduled breaks, like holidays or summer breaks, that's not counted against you. That's kind of included in the 2 years from start to finish. So if it's regularly scheduled breaks, you normally don't have to worry about those. So yeah, if it's officially a 24-month program, if I'm doing my math right, that's 2 years, then you should be eligible for a 3-year PGWP. If it was like 23 months or 21 months, then that would be much tougher to get a 2-year or 3-year PGWP. I mean, in the end, it's really at the discretion of the CBSA officer or the IRCC officer who is issuing the work permit. So, if it's like close to 2 years, they might, they might be kind and give you the 3 years, but it's really at their discretion. Yeah. And did you have another question? I noticed your hand is still up.
No, sorry, I don't have. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right.
Question, please.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, just to clarify, the program is different from the time that we finish our program, right? Because in Extenda, our program is 4 years. It's a bachelor's degree. So we are amenable for the 3-year PGWP.
Yeah, so if you did a 4-year program, then the maximum that you can get for a PGWP is 3 years.
Yeah,
because they don't give more unless they come out with like a public policy, which they had, was it last year, which was an 18-month extension. I mean, who knows if that will happen in the future, but so some people got an extension on their PGWP, but at this time the cap is 3 years, even if you did like a 4 or 5-year program.
Yeah, because other students are they're thinking that the time that you finish your schooling is equal to your program. So it doesn't matter how fast we finish our program, but our program is 4 years. So we're supposed to have the 3-year PGWP.
It depends what your documents say, because the decision is being based on what your transcripts and what your graduation certificate says for the amount of time.
Because in Extenda, it's a 4-year degree program.
Yeah, and if it's a 4-year program, even if you finish faster, you should still be eligible for a 3-year PGWP. Yeah.
And I have another question, because I did flag bowling when I became tourist and then student, and then my husband, it was my husband who applied for the CBC, Canada Border Services Agency. So he had his open work permit gotten in the border, but it's not in Vancouver. It's in the border of Montana, and he didn't pay anything. So if we get our PGWP at the border, do we pay something?
Yes, you should be. You should still have to pay the open work permit processing fee.
Okay.
And the
Because my husband
yeah,
didn't pay for anything when he did.
there's two fees. There's the open work permit holder fee and the open work permit just the work permit processing fee. It's 155 for that and $100 for the open work permit holder fee.
Okay. Okay. Thank
Yeah,
you.
but you said your husband got it for free?
Yeah, he didn't pay anything.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I haven't heard of that happening yet.
So from tourists,
Yeah.
so
Mhm.
my application was it was done, of course, through IRCC because it's from tourist to student. So, but the
Mhm.
permit, I got it at the border. So
Mhm.
I just
So
got
you
it.
flagpoled yourself.
Yes. And
Yeah.
then when I was at the border, I was asked like, do you have your family? Yeah, they could change their status here. And so my husband, he was there. He was just waiting for me. So he got his open work permit
Mhm.
and we didn't pay anything. We only had
Hmm.
his, what do you call that? It's not payment there's no application fee at all. It is, what do you call that one? Something that he's supposed to do like in our country. I forgot. It's just $80. It's
The
not,
biometrics.
yes,
85?
that one. Yeah, that
The
one.
biometrics.
He only paid for the biometrics.
Okay. Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, that's great for your husband.
Yeah.
Okay, nice to meet you, Mary. Any other questions about length of time for the PGWPs? I'm trying to figure out how to get these blue lines off my screen. Oh, but don't mind the blue lines. If you can see the blue lines on my screen, I don't know how they got there. It was probably me. Okay, well, let's go back over to about the documents needed for a PGWP application. Okay. Oh,
Sorry.
go
Hi.
ahead, Adele. Yes.
Yes, thank you. You mentioned that we need to show that we have ties to our home countries, but what is valid? What is a valid document or information that we have ties?
Yeah, so ties to home country could show, for example, maybe you've got a car, you own a car there, you own property, you have something to return back to, maybe like a job or something like that. I mean, in the case of students, oftentimes it's more difficult to prove ties to home country. So if you have your family there, your family's paying for your program, that can also be used as proof as well. Because oftentimes students are very young, so they don't own property, they don't have cars. And that's more for like workers who are older, who are applying to work in Canada. They will show documents that they have some kind of tie back to their home country. Even bank accounts are also ties to home country. So as long as like there's still some connection to go back to, especially family, if your family's there, then that really helps. Okay, great. All right, any other questions so far? All right, I'll move on to the next slide here. Okay, so how to make your PGWP count. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about after you get a PGWP. And let's see here. So once you get your PGWP, it's really important to consider your future goals. So if your goal is to gain permanent residency, then you have a limited amount of time to gain Canadian work experience in the appropriate national occupation classification. So that's the definition of NOC, National Occupation Classification. And so once you get your PGWP, it's really important to find the right job that will get you to where you want to go in the future. So if your goal is permanent residency, then you want to make sure that you're eligible for one of these express entry streams. So express entry, it's one of the economic pathways to permanent residency in Canada. We have many different pathways to permanent residency. We have the family class, we have refugees, and we have this economic class. We also have humanitarian and compassionate classes as well. So under express entry, there's three kind of pathways. So we have Canadian Experience Class, we have Federal Skilled Worker Program, and the Federal Skilled Trades Program. So most of you, you're probably in, business, administration, finance degrees right now. So we can probably say confidently that the federal skilled trades program, I'm just going to draw a line through that, won't apply for you. So you want to focus on a program like the Canadian Experience class. So I'm just going to circle that here for everybody to see. I mean, the federal skilled worker program is also an option, but you have to have a high language level. I believe it's CLB 7 in order to qualify for this program. For Canadian Experience class, they have like different language requirements. Really, they're looking at Canadian work experience. So having, for example, a minimum of 12 months work experience will help you to become eligible for this pathway. And that's really the main eligibility criteria. Like you have to have 12 months of work experience in tier 0, 1, 2, or 3 categories. And having you can have English language CLB levels in 5 or 7. Like you can have some in 5, you can have some in over 7. You'll get more points if you have the higher the English test scores you have, the more points you'll get. Of course, you'll get more points depending on different factors, which I'll talk about in the next slide. But I wanted to mention super quick here something that was introduced by the IRCC in June of this year, so 6 months ago, and that's these 6 new category-based draws. So express entry is like a pool. So you submit a profile. The profile is free to submit, and once your profile is in the pool, it's valid for 12 months. And so depending on how many points you have, so now you're either put in like this general pool, or you're placed in one of these 6 new categories where the recent draws have been much lower than kind of the general pool. So if you have French language proficiency, you might be eligible for this new stream. If you're in healthcare, you might be eligible for different occupations in healthcare. And so all of these categories, so STEM, trade, transport, agriculture, and agri-food occupations, all of these categories have specific job titles that are eligible for these really low draws. Some of the draws have been in the 300s, which is really great. However, the general pool has been seeing higher draws of over 500 points. And for someone to gain, 500 plus points, you have to have like excellent English, lots of work experience, full age points, for example. So it's making it a little bit more challenging for people who are in the general pool if they don't have a job listed in one of these 6 new categories. Now, so these are the categories for 2023. So in 2024, the IRCC might change the job titles, or they might even change the categories altogether, depending on the needs of our Canadian labor market. So it's something to keep an eye on to see if there will be any changes in 2024, like maybe there's more business roles and things like that. I do believe under STEM, there are some like businessy things in there. So if you're graduating with like a business degree, maybe check out the STEM occupations in this list and see if there's like a job title that you would be eligible for, and then apply for jobs that would kind of get you on one of these pathways under the 6 new categories. That would be my recommendation, because otherwise it's going to take you a bit longer to get of the points you need to get an invitation to apply from the general pool. So that's kind of my advice about express entry. And next, I'll talk a little bit more about Canadian Experience class. I'm just going to see here, how can I erase my annotations? I'm just having a look here. How do I clean up my screen? Let's see here. Any tips, Tanya?
Learning too, but I will let you know.
Yeah, I can't find like an eraser. Okay, bear with me, everybody. It's been a while since I've been on Zoom, apparently. Okay. Oh, I see we've got some questions coming in the chat. So I'll try to get to some of the questions in the chat too. Okay, so
there's like an eraser in the editor.
There's an eraser where, sorry?
In the editor, when you're
An
editing with the
editor.
lines, yeah.
Let's see here. And I see a column on the side now. Perfect. Why didn't I not see this before? Aha, I've got it. Okay. There we go. Thank you very much, whoever was thoughtful to help me out with that. I appreciate it. Okay. I was looking on the wrong sides. All right, here we go. We'll go over to the next slide. All right, so Canadian Experience Class, CEC. So this is the most common express entry stream for students. So as I mentioned, you need 12 months of continuous work experience, either in tier 0, 1, 2, or 3 categories. And you can look up your job titles on the NOC website to see what tier category your job is and to see if you're eligible for express entry. Usually if you get like an administration role or business role or tech role, you should be eligible for one of these categories. And so you get more points awarded for, English and French language skills, your age. If you're between 18 to 30, you get full age points. You can get points for your international work experience from your home country or elsewhere. And of course, your Canadian work experience, your Canadian education gets you more points. If you have higher education, such as like a master's degree or PhD, if you have a sibling with permanent residency in Canada, you can get some extra points. And also, if you get an LMIA job offer, so this is for a restricted work permit, you can also get a bonus of 50 points. And another one I didn't mention on here, but a provincial nominee can also gain you 600 points for permanent residency. So I didn't really talk too much about provincial nominee programs on here today because we don't have too much time, but that's another area you could look in as well. With BCP&P, they have some tech streams, healthcare, what else? They have some special job titles, specializations such as like veterinarians and stuff like that. So it might be similar to your background. So I would definitely check out the job titles for BCP&P. Bibi's got a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to ask, so for, like you mentioned, for the BCP&P, if we are applying through BCP&P, we do not need an LMIA, or still we need it?
You can have any work status. Like you can have a restricted work permit, you can have an open work permit, and usually you'll need the support of your employer because they will have to provide some documents to show that your job is real and that their business is real. But other than that, it doesn't matter like what kind of work permit you have. It's just that you're gaining legal work in Canada.
So if we are applying for BCP&P, we have to wait for our studies to finish, or we can just apply if the employer is supporting us?
Well, that's a good question. I believe the requirements for skilled worker, like you have to have at least 2 years of full-time continuous experience. But for tech, that's with tech, they do accept contract work experience. So it's usually like after you gain more Canadian work experience, because you get more points. It also has its own point system with BCP&P. So you really want to gain your Canadian work experience because that will actually give you more points towards the total. And right now the skilled worker stream, like the points are quite high. So you have to have like high education, high wages, because they look at your wage per hour, not your salary. And that's kind of how they calculate things. So you have to have, be making like a really high wage per hour. Living in Vancouver gives you 0 points actually. So if you live outside of Vancouver, you get points. So they have its own point system. Yeah. So I recommend getting that work experience after you graduate for sure.
Okay.
Giovanna, you've got a question?
Yes, but if you will talk about that later, you can skip it and answer me later. It is related to spouse open work permit, which is under our post-graduation work permit.
Oh, I do have that in my Q&A.
Okay,
coming up.
so
I
I
actually
will
think
wait.
it was a question from you. I remember seeing your name in the registration.
Yes,
So.
that's my the biggest concern. So I will wait for your response. It's not a problem. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. I will come back to that in a minute.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, so that's a little taste of the Canadian experience class, and how you can get more points to get an invitation to apply for permanent residency. Any questions about Canadian experience class before I move on to my next points? Okay, no questions. All right, so this is our Q&A period. So I've taken some of your questions from the registration, the most common ones, and I've put them here in my presentation, and I've put people's names in here too. So I do have Giovanna's question, actually. I've got 12 questions today, and if we have time at the end, I'll try to take some more live questions as we go. So Ellie Ann asked a question about, I just want to know if I can still work when I finish school, or if I should stop until I do my paperwork for the PGWP. Now, this is a really common question. So typically, when you finish your study program, which is final day of classes, whenever you get your transcript, that's actually when you should technically stop working. You shouldn't be continuing working. However, there are some exceptions to this rule, such as applying for the postgraduate work permit. So if you apply for the postgraduate work permit, you are allowed to keep working. The other exception would be like if you're enrolling as a student again in another program, you could actually keep working as well. So with this exception, you can work full-time and until a decision is made on your application. So if your application was submitted to the IRCC, for example, then you're going to be waiting 3 or 4 months. So when you get your decision, if your decision is negative, if you refuse for whatever reasons, then you actually must stop working and apply for restoration of status. So that's in the event that, for some reason they refuse your application. That's why I recommend going to the CBSA, because they can process your work permit much faster and you don't have to worry about being in maintained status or not. So the thing with applying for the PGWP, you have to be in status with your study permit. So if you're, for example, if your study permit's expiring at the end of December, you graduate on December 15th, you have to apply in those 15 days for the work permit. Otherwise, if you apply after your study permit expires, you now have no legal status in Canada. So you have to apply for restoration of status back to a student so that you can apply for your work permit. So that usually costs, you have to pay for your work, you have to pay for your study permit again, $150 plus $200 for restoration of status. So $350, and then you'll have to pay any work permit fees. So that's a little bit information about working in between stopping your studies and getting your PGWP. Another question I had here from Hanya. If my husband's work permit is linked to my study permit, does it expire too when I finish my program? So usually when you get, when your spouse gets a open work permit, the expiry date will match the expiry date on the principal applicant, the study permit application. So if you, for example, maybe you finished your studies a little bit earlier, and so your expiry date of your study permit is like quite a long way off, then your spouse, your spouse's work permit will also expire like later on, and then they have time to apply. Like if you get the PGWP, they can apply right away with you, or they can apply later on. Like if they still have time on their work permit, they can keep working technically, because it's an open work permit. They can keep working until the expiration date on their work permit, and then switch over as they are eligible to get a new work permit under the PGWP process. So I hope that answers that question. So it doesn't, it does expire. So the work permit does expire when the study permit expires, but if if someone were to get a PGWP a little bit earlier and the other work permit, the spouse's work permit expires much later, you have a bit of time where you can wait before applying, or you could just apply and get that new work permit right away. So it's really up to you, and how much paperwork you want to do and when. The other questions we have here from Giovanna, should my study permit be valid at least 6 months prior to applying for PGWP? So with this question, it doesn't really matter if your study permit is valid 6 months prior. It's just that it's valid when you apply. So if, as I mentioned before, if you apply after your study permit expires, then you have to apply for restoration of status. So the 6 months prior doesn't really matter. It's just the fact is you should be in status when you apply. Otherwise, you're going to have to pay more money, and it's more paperwork for yourself. And then the other question we have from Giovanna: do I need to have a job offer or current job position in the moment of applying under tier 1, 2, or 3 if I want to apply in the same time for open work permit for my husband? Otherwise, he can only be eligible for a visitor permit as long as I don't have a required job. So the great thing about the PGWP when you apply for it is you don't need to have a job offer. So, if you have a job as a student and that's going to continue into like a full-time position once you graduate, that's great. But many people have like a part-time job that maybe they don't want to continue once they get their PGWP, and they want to look for a more professional job. So it really doesn't matter when you apply for your PGWP if you have a job offer or not. That's not going to impact your application process, and that won't affect the spouse's application if you have or don't have a job offer. It's only with restricted work permits having a job offer is necessary. So I hope that answers your question, Giovanna.
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay, great.
Now I can breathe.
Now you can breathe. Yeah, you don't have to worry. Another interesting question I got from Sheena is, does the address matter in case a student is moving provinces after graduation? Yes and no. This really doesn't matter if you're going to the CVSA to get your PGWP. If you apply to the IRCC and suddenly you're moving during your work permit processing time, then you can submit a web form to the IRCC with your address change, or you can call them up. They are a bit difficult to get a hold of, but you can also try calling them up to let them know your change in address. So it's not a big deal as long as you let them know, because your work permit, if you don't let them know, your work permit will be sent to your old address, and and that's going to cause some delays and complications because your employer will want to see your work permit once it's approved. So I'd recommend, letting the IRCC know as soon as possible if any address changes, so that they can make sure that the work permit is being sent to the correct address. Sometimes work permits do get lost in the mail. I've had that issue before with clients, and we've had to get a hold of the IRCC and let them know the work permit never arrived, and they've had to resend it. So if they have to resend the work permit, they'll just reissue a new number. So if it did get sent to the old address, don't worry, they can reissue a new one for you. Elizabeth, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chelsea. Related to the Giovanna questions, I'm wondering if I apply for my post-graduation work permit and I don't have a job offer, and what about if my work permit husband expires, like close to my request? Is that a problem, that if I don't have a job offer, or if I'm not working once my post-graduation work permit arrives, what is gonna happen with my husband?
Yeah, so you're saying, like, if you get a PGWP, but you decide not to work on your PGWP for whatever reason, and your spouse just works, then they should have the same time length as your PGWP. It should match. Sometimes it might end earlier depending on factors like maybe the passport's expiring, and so the work permit might end a bit sooner, but it's easy to reapply for an extension if you just explain reasons like, oh, my passport's expiring. So in that case, you know, if you're eligible for a 3-year PGWP, your spouse should also get an open work permit. That's up
Okay,
to
so
3
it doesn't
years.
matter if I'm not working, right?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that doesn't matter. And that often happens. Like sometimes, you know, students, they have kids or families and they need to take care of them. So the spouse is the one who's gained that Canadian work experience to put towards permanent residency, like express entry.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Great question. All right. I'm just trying to be conscious of the time because I know we've got a few minutes left. Okay, so Marissa's got a question here. So she's asking, when is the best time to apply for the PGWP? And this was a common question I did see in the questions from the registration period. It really depends on you, the student. So if you want to get working right away, then the best time to apply is as soon as you get your transcript, your final transcripts, or your graduation letter. But you know, maybe you need to take a break. Maybe you need a vacation. You want to go home and see your family for a bit. You can also apply for the PGWP outside of Canada, and you have 180 days from the time that you graduate to get the PGWP. So you could take a bit of a break, still apply, and get it later on. I see we've got some questions here from Bruce. Bruce and Perla.
Hi, thank you. So I just want to clarify if I heard it or understand it correctly. So, here's the scenario. Just in case, if for example your your documents will be ready by, let's say, December 25 or something like that, and then on that day, in the morning of December 25th, and then on that day, specifically that day, you lodged your application in like IRC online for PGWP. Will you get like a confirmation of the received documents from the PGWP, and would that be the basis of like your status as that you can work for 40 hours, or do you still need to wait for the decision still for you to wait for the for you to be able to work 40 hours?
So once you submit your application, yeah, so as I mentioned before, as long as you're in status, like you still have your study permit and you submit your work permit application, you can actually continue working full time until a decision is made on your application, whether it's approved or denied.
I see.
Yeah, so yeah, as long as, but the important thing is to make sure your study permit is still in status when you apply, so then you can keep working full time.
And then just one last question. And then you were the validity of your PGWP will start on the day that you process or the day that it has got approved?
Usually the day gets approved, so it will be on the work permit itself that the time will start ticking. So I just wanted to go back to like the processing time. So for the 180 days, the calculation of the 180 days like to apply once you graduate, it begins on the day the student's final marks are issued or the day the formal written notification of the program completion is received. So you have 180 days to apply from the date, you know, whichever came first. Either you got your final transcript or you got that letter of completion. So you have that time frame, which I believe is about 6 months to apply for the PGWP. And then as soon as you get approved from that time, that's when the time will start for the length of your PGWP from the work permit itself.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Great question. Okay, Perla.
Hi. So I have this question. I applied for my PGWP and for me and my family. So I got the approval, but my husband was denied because it says like he didn't provide enough information like that I have a work under the NOC. So they say I can apply again. I just need to provide my employer's letter like with the qualifications and that. So how do I know my job applies or it's like sufficient for his work permit to reapply for his work permit? And also his original work permit expires on March. So if he got a denial on the renewal, can he still work? Because like
he still has status in Canada. So if his current work permit expires in March, then technically he still has legal status in Canada to work.
Okay.
So it's, in this case, it's pretty easy to reapply because he still has
Yeah.
status. So he doesn't have to apply for restoration of status.
Okay.
And then just correct any information the IRCC wants. Like sometimes they want extra information. Sometimes they want, you know, proof that, you know, you'll return to your home country, for example. In this case, it sounds like they want some more information about your job, the principal applicants.
Yeah, because they said like my job, like his spouse job is like, I didn't provide any information because at that time I didn't have a job. So right now I have a job. But how do I know that job that I have is enough for what they're asking? Because they're asking like my job is under the like it is like skilled job, like what I need to, how do I know that about my job?
Yeah, so you would look at maybe your job contract, look at your job title, and then you can put your job title into the NOC website to see, you know, what the NOC code is and what the tier category is, and then just provide that information in a reapplication for your husband.
Okay, so with my job contract would be enough to prove what I'm doing?
The job contract, but also you want to find your NOC code, your NOC code for your job title, because that will help them with whatever decision.
The NOC code.
Yeah, yeah,
okay.
and you can find that on the website. I mean, sometimes some job titles don't match up with the job titles on NOC, so you want to find something that's at least 70, like the job description's at least 70% similar. So some administration jobs have, you know, might not have an actual job title NOC and on the website. So you have to find a job title that's like as similar as possible to the job that you're doing right now.
Oh, okay, perfect. Yeah. Thank you very much for
good luck. Okay, we've got a question from Joanne.
Hi, good evening. I just have a question. Because I am currently working as an admin assistant, but it's working from home. Is it eligible to apply for PGWP in the future?
Yeah, I mean, you should be eligible for the PGWP as long as you finished a program of study. So it doesn't matter if you've got a job offer. I know many people who have gotten PGWPs and they don't have a job lined up, for example.
So even if I'm working from home, that will be okay.
Yeah, you can work from home. It's an open work permit. So as long as you know, if you want to get that Canadian work experience, you can do hybrid work. I mean, a lot of things have changed because of the pandemic. So you can work from home, you can do hybrid work, you can work in person. But as long as you've got that company contract and proof that you're working for an organization, then that work experience you can use towards permanent residency in the future.
And as long as my job is under the NOC or tier that they are looking for, like,
yeah. So you want
to apply for PGWP because I am also with my family.
Okay.
So I should have like at least NOC B and higher, right?
So they're not doing like the AB system anymore. It's tier 0, 1, 1, 2, 3. Yeah. So you just want to make sure you're in one of those categories, which I believe admin assistant should be tier 2, I think, or tier 3. So you should be okay.
That would be okay. Yeah, because I want to, of course, once apply for PGWP, my family would still be with me.
Yeah,
here
of course.
In Canada.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
So I should probably mention for applications for spouses, you can do like a family application, or you could submit separately. It's really up to you. And I've seen people successful either way, submitting as a family or submitting later on. Sometimes if the principal applicants for some reason denied, then maybe you save a bit of money by not submitting the spouse's application right away. You fix the issue in the principal application, resubmits, and as long as it's approved, then you can submit your spouse's application as well. Okay. Truman, I believe Truman's got a question here.
Yeah, I have two quick questions.
Sure.
The first one is, imagine the length of your passport is less than 2 years, for example, and you can apply for a 3 years open work permit. What happened in that case?
Yeah, I believe I have a question that's similar to that. I don't know. I've got a question here from Adrian actually on screen. Like, what if my passport expires at the end of 2024? So if your passport's expiring pretty soon, they will only issue you a work permit to the expiration date of your passport. So I do really recommend, like, if your passport's expiring, renew your passport as soon as possible, because otherwise you'll have to submit 2 applications, like your original, the PGWP that you're going to submit now, and then when later on, once your passport expires, you have to submit again, pay the fees again, to extend it. Because if you are eligible for like a 3-year PGWP, but your passport's expiring 1 year, you're gonna have to do 2 applications. So get that passport renewed before you submit your first PGWP application. So that would be my recommendation. Does that kind of answer your question, Truman?
Yeah, and the second one, just a quick one, is, for example, for the permanent residence and for the post-graduation, if the same thing, job offer as a promotion offer, like a promotion letter from your company, it will count the same?
Sorry, say that again?
For example, for the permanent resident and the post-graduation work permit, is the same job offer? Is the same, for example, a contract? Like, if the same if they promote you from inside within the company?
Like, do you need a job contract, like a job offer for permanent residency?
Yeah, or for graduation.
For graduation, no, not for the PGWP. You don't necessarily need to have a job offer. If you have one, great. That's great to have work lined up. But for permanent residency, yes, it's good to have a job here in Canada already, and be applying while you have that job. Some jobs need to be continuous. Other jobs can be contract, like tech, if you're applying, getting nominated through BCP&P. So just be aware of like the type of job that the type of job contract that you're getting.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, great. Marissa, I believe these are your questions I'm answering here on screen. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, just to clarify, so once I finish my studies and I receive the completion letter for the institution, you mentioned that we have 180 days to, like, a window frame to apply for the PGWP.
Yep.
So my question is, during that window frame, can I go outside Canada, or?
Sure. Yeah, you can go outside Canada and apply for the PGWP from outside Canada. The processing times will be different, and you'll have to wait outside Canada. It will be difficult for you to come back as a visitor, right? So you'll have to wait outside Canada until a decision's made on your application. But as long as you're eligible, there shouldn't be any issues. You're just going to be waiting a bit of time.
Well, for example, like, can I go out if I didn't apply for the PGWP? So can I go outside and then come back and apply here in Canada?
Well, it depends on your status. Like, if your study permit status, if you finished your diploma early, let's say, and you still have a lot of time left on your study permit, then you could come back. But if you finished your program and you have a couple weeks left on your study permit, the CBSA, there's a chance they could deny you at the border, because they would ask, well, what's a good reason for you to come back if your studies have finished?
Okay.
Even though they know you want to apply for the work permit, but under our laws, it's like, yeah, if you finished your reasons for being in Canada, then there's no good reason to let you back in. So then you would have to apply from outside.
So it's better that once I finish my program, apply for the PGWP, and then I can go out because I have the submission.
Sure. Like, if you want to take a little vacation, right? You can apply for the PGWP, get it, go on a little vacation, come back. But if you want to take like a big chunk of time, like maybe you need 3 months to spend with your family, then maybe it's better to apply from outside of Canada, because you don't want to waste your time on your PGWP, spending time outside of Canada. You want to make that work experience count towards like permanent residency goals or something like that. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Chelsea. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Great questions. So I think we've covered Marissa's questions. We've covered Adrian's. Araceli's questions down below here. If I'm married, can my husband also apply for the PGWP? This one, no, unless he's a student, he can't apply for PGWP. He gets an open work permit, which is different. So I wanted to clarify that question quickly. And then just going over to Nicole's question over here, full-time, part-time, and breaks or leaves during an academic year. You know, does this affect the eligibility of the PGWP? In short, not really, because regularly scheduled breaks are kind of counted towards the time. So you shouldn't have to worry about that. And it won't affect the length. Like you'll still, like, it really depends what's on the letter of your graduation, like your graduation certificate or your final transcripts, like how much time your program was. That's what really matters when the IRCC officer or the CBSA officer is calculating how much time they should give you for your PGWP. Okay. Tanya, I know we're running out of time here today, but we've got 2 more hands up. So maybe can we take the 2 last questions and then
Yeah,
wrap
let's
up?
take it. Yes.
Okay, sure. Benalini, I hope I pronounced your name right. Oh, I think we've lost them. Okay, Abraham, we'll take your question.
Thank you, Chelsea. Thank you for your time. Quick question. If should I renew the open work permit of my partner when I request the post-graduation work permit at the same time?
It depends when your study permit and the open work permit is expiring. If they're both expiring pretty soon, just put in a family application and apply for both of them. But if you have lots of room time, you can apply for the PGWP first, wait till it gets approved so you know for sure that your spouse will get their open work permits. I mean, it's never for sure, but at least, you know, they've got a better chance of getting it approved instead of having 2 refusals and you've wasted some money.
I get it. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. Oh, Benalini's back. I'll take your question, and I believe after that we're wrapping up because we've run over time here. So Benalini, I hope oh, we've lost them again. Okay, Sheena, I'll take Sheena's last question.
Thank you for that, Chelsea. I believe most of us are graduating.
Oh. Sorry, was that?
No, go ahead.
Okay, I'll take Sheena, then Benalini will come back to you. I think we were losing you before. Okay, go ahead, Sheena.
All right. Thank you. I think most of us are completing our studies this December, and our completion letter is estimated to be received on January. My question is, are we allowed to work full-time while waiting for the completion letter?
I mean, technically, I'm just going back here to the rules. Let's see here. So, yeah, you have to cease work after receiving final grades. So as soon as you receive your final grades, that's when technically you're supposed to start working. But you know, if you can get the application in for the PGWP as soon as possible, then you are allowed to keep working.
Okay, so we just need to check with our
there's a gray area.
Holiday.
Yeah, so there might be like a little gap of time. So yeah, it might be good to have a chat with your employer and just to kind of explain the situation.
All right. Yeah, because I was reading some that as soon as we complete our studies or as soon as we attend our last day of classes, we are considered as grad like that. So I was confused.
Yeah, so on the government website, it says when you receive your final grades. So final grades. I mean, they might look at like last day of classes, but the wording they use is when you receive your final grades. So whenever all the grades come in, sometimes that's actually in January if you're ending in December. So I would go by that like threshold, that marker. And then as soon as you get your letter of completion, your certificate, then you can submit your application to ensure that, you know, you can keep working legally.
All right, thank you so much for clarifying.
You're welcome. Benalini?
Yeah, Benelin. So
okay,
yeah, I was actually talking. I don't know what happened, but
you must have been on mute. Yeah, it wasn't coming up on my screen, so I didn't see you.
Okay,
apologies.
So I actually have 2 questions. The first one is about the flag pulling. So if you decided to do the CBSA, like the plug pulling, and when you apply your PGWP there and your application is denied at the border, will you be able to re-enter Canada?
Well, you're not actually outside of Canada. You're in the CBSA office, so you're still here. As long as you still have study permit status, like you have status in Canada, they're not going to leave you in between Canada and the US border, because oftentimes many people don't have a US visa. So if you get denied at the border for this permit application, as long as you still have status, like your study permit status is still valid, then you can, go home, correct whatever errors they said. Maybe they wanted some more information. You go home, you get the information that you want, and then you go back again and try again.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And another question is regarding the work experience required for applying for PR. Does the count of work experience, because we technically we have to have like at least 1 year work experience here in Canada under tier 0 to 3. Does the count of work experience only begin once we have our PGWP, or does it begin once we submitted?
So to answer your question, something, and actually nobody asked today, was does work experience during the time of study count towards permanent residency? And under the Canadian Experience Class program, it doesn't. Only the Federal Skilled Worker Program counts student work experience. So if you're applying for Canadian Experience Class, then the time, as soon as you change your status and you get your PGWP, that's when your work experience time, that's when the clock starts. So it won't count any work experience that you gained while you were a student. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. And I'm sorry, everyone. I guess it's time to wrap up here. We've gone almost 20 minutes over. But this has given me great joy to talk to all of you today and to share information and tips about the PGWP process and permanent residency here in Canada. I'm just going to pop over. So this is my team here at Britannia Immigration Services. So I'm the RCIC, and this is my colleague Sarah, who's an education consultant. And we have made a special promotion for everybody today. If you have further questions and you want to have a immigration consultation about your, permanent residency pathways, PGWPs, we're happy to help you. So I'll just share this QR code with everybody. And thank you so much for joining today. I'm sorry I didn't even get to the questions. I know there were questions in the chat. I don't know if Tanya has any things to say to wrap up today, but it's been an absolute pleasure, and I hope to see some of you again.
Thank you, Chelsea. No, thank you for your time, for helping us, for supporting us in all of the questions. And thank you, everyone, for being here. The session will be posted on Moodle tomorrow, if you can share it with your classmates too. Thank you, Chelsea, again.
Thank
Bye.
you so
Have a
much,
good
Tanya.
night.
Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.